Alternative win conditions in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are, in my opinion, absolutely awesome. 99% of duels in this game are usually won by reducing your opponent's life points to 0, and that's fine, but there's just something kind of fascinating about seeing a duelist essentially say, screw that, I'll do things my way, as they veer off course in an attempt to find a new path towards victory. Alternate win conditions have been around since the very beginning of this game itself. Decking your opponent out and Exodia have been here since the very start, and we would soon get another alternate win con with Bakura's renowned Destiny board shortly after. The thing is, as fun as they may be, these strategies aren't usually associated with a lot of success, at least not competitively speaking. But what if I told you that a very long time ago, one of these forgotten alternate win cons was actually a competitive titan of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta? A deck that was truly feared in its heyday, and one that we in the TCG don't revere at all because here it never reached greatness. This story is all about the horrifyingly strong last turn OTK deck that in the TCG we never got to play. Today you'll learn how the deck worked, when it was played, and how it unfortunately failed to translate to the TCG. But before we jump into the video, if you like learning about Yu-Gi-Oh! History or just enjoy my videos in general, then help the channel grow by giving the video a thumbs up. You can also leave your thoughts and comments below, and yes, I do read them all. Lastly, subscribe for weekly videos if you haven't already, and keep up to date by giving me a follow on Twitter at MegaCapitalG. If you know your Yu-Gi-Oh! History, you already know that we're going back to the DM era for this story, November 29th, 2001 to be exact. That date marked the release of the Mythological Age Core Booster set in the OCG. This set heavily revolved around the Virtual World arc from the Duel Monsters anime and Noah Kaiba's new Spirit Monsters. Last Turn was released in this very set as a super rare and was oddly tied in with the anime. It featured two of Noah's boss Spirit Monsters clashing in its art and was played by Seto Kaiba against Noah at the climax of their duel. The card instantly caught the interest of OCG players. Not only was it a strange new alternative win condition that intrigued creative deck builders who wondered if they could even pull it off, but unlike Destiny board, this win condition played out in a single turn. That of course made it far more tempting and appealing to duelists as the variables for what could go wrong were reduced exponentially. This meant that any opponent caught off guard would surely lose. Last Turn was a normal trap that read, this card can only be activated during your opponent's turn when your life points are 1000 or less. Select one monster on your side of the field and send all other cards on the field and in their respective owners' hands to their respective graveyards. Your opponent must then special summon one monster from his or her deck in face-up attack position and attack your selected monster. Any battle damage from this battle is treated as 0. The player whose monster remains alone on the field at the end phase of this turn wins the duel. Any other case results in a draw. A very strange card indeed, perfectly suited for the climactic finish in an anime battle where two characters would bring forth their most powerful monster for a winner-takes-all ultimate clash. But for IRL competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, not so much. First, there was a small matter of reaching death's door, but making sure you didn't cross it. Organically getting to 1000 or less life points was a difficult and risky proposition. You could just take direct attacks from your opponent to get low, but you'd have to make sure not to go over the edge and take lethal damage. It'd be like backing yourself into a corner while knowing that your next mistake would most likely be your last. Next, you'd have to find a way to get a sizable juggernaut on the field without taking any more battle damage. This behemoth in theory would be large enough to pummel anything that your opponent would summon. Last but certainly not least was the hurdle of a pesky little card that would banish itself and any monster it battled. That monster was DD Warrior, and it was a giant wet blanket for the idea of winning via last turn. Simply put, DD Warrior could almost always ensure a draw rather than a loss for your opponent after the following battle. And even if they weren't main decking it, they could easily side the card in to thwart the play. On paper, Last Turn didn't appear to be the most practical of win conditions to build a deck around. Luckily though, OCG players solved two of the problems immediately by thinking outside the box. Rather than worry about specific monsters that countered Last Turn or having a gigantic monster on field that couldn't lose a battle, they instead thought, what if we made it so our opponent couldn't summon a monster to begin with? Then don't we just win by default? This was the idea Konami never saw coming when they created the card. The idea that the activating player would completely circumvent the spirit of last turn to create a scenario in which, well, quite frankly, they couldn't lose. Here's an example last turn OTK deck list from December 2001. Most probably know the first ace monster that made this strategy viable, Jogan the Spiritualist. His role in this deck was, as previously mentioned, a monster to be played alongside last turn that would stop your opponent from special summoning any monster to battle with. In doing so, you'd be left with the only monster on field and thus be declared the winner. The second ace, however, was something that most TCG duelists would have never imagined: Devil Frankenstein, aka Cyberstein. While this format destroyer may not have been widely available in the TCG until the GX era around mid-2005, he was legal in the first year of the OCG. Cyberstein fit seamlessly in the last turn deck. First, just like Jogan, he would effectively lock your opponent out of special summoning to capture victory. This was done by having Stein summon the niche but game-sealing Last Warrior from another planet, which coincidentally was released as an ultra rare in the Labyrinth of Nightmare Core booster set, exactly like in the TCG. The second thing that Cyberstein achieved was helping the player reduce their life points drastically. The giant life point investment was clearly supposed to be Stein's biggest flaw, but in this strategy specifically, it actually aided you in reaching your win condition. OCG Duelist also supercharged the deck by building it around the powerhouse Card of Safe Return of all things. Card of Safe Return was always a card that demanded you invest heavily around it to tap its full potential, and luckily, Premature Burial was unlimited at this time. This was utterly nuts, as players could turbo monsters to the graveyard with Painful Choice, Graceful Charity, and Card Destruction, then reborn them for utility while drawing cards the entire time. I'd also like to point out, if you think triple Premature Burial and Shallow Grave was enough to abuse Card of Safe Return, you should keep in mind that Giant Trinade was also unlimited. This meant that a duelist could bounce opposing traps while getting the opportunity to reuse copies of Premature Burial again. Each activation of Burial also helped the duelist reach 1,000 or less life points, so it actually tied into the activation clause of last turn as well. Some monsters might seem out of place here, but each was meticulously picked. Thunder Dragon was excellent fodder for Graceful Charity and Card Destruction, while Cannon Soldier was used for tributing Reborn Witches and Sangan to search either Jogan or Cyberstein. During the next 5 months, the last turn deck was a terror to deal with, as it battled rivals such as the Reverse Worlds Exchange of the Spirit OTK, the Yada Lock, and the Treasure Exodia deck in the OCG's metagame. The format was fast and, honestly, kind of an ideal breeding ground for pseudo FTKs because of the potency of Card of Safe Return coupled with all the monster recursion. There was an update to the limit regulation list in January 2002, but the last turn deck pretty much escaped unscathed. Last turn itself did go to semi-limited status, but luckily cards like Megamorph were hit due to the Cyberstein OTK rather than the beast itself. So this deck pretty much just kept chugging along right up until May. At that point, Konami did bring the hammer down with 15 newly limited cards. Among them, Premature Burial, Upstart Goblin, and Card Destruction. OCG competitive builds of last turn were absolutely decimated, and the deck fell out of the metagame pretty much overnight. Casual duelists and enthusiasts did push forward with the new Naga last turn build, but it wasn't nearly as good and relied on a lot more gimmicks. Naga, or Serpentine Princess, was a super obscure monster that when returned to the deck while face up, would allow you to summon a level 3 or lower monster straight from your deck. This meant instant access to Cyberstein or Jogan the Spiritualist. The key to triggering the princess's effect was using monster recovery. This card was basically like reload, but it shuffled a monster from your field back into your deck as well. The Naga build also main copies of Inspection for more ways to reach 1,000 or less life points easily, as this effect could be used as many times as you desired. Lastly, Last Will was added into the deck for synergy with Cannon Soldier to summon Naga and Cyberstein more easily. Overall, this was a pretty cool rendition of the strategy and a really creative deck, but it severely lacked the speed of its predecessor. When it comes to the TCG, Last Turn was pretty underwhelming. In my opinion, our best builds were significantly worse than the OCG's second version of the deck. This was for a myriad of reasons. Number one, our card pool wasn't advanced enough. When Last Turn premiered in Legacy of Darkness, the TCG had no Cyberstein or Wall of Revealing Light to instantly cut life points down or to get another way of blocking special summons. This alone made TCG builds essentially impossible upon release. Next, we really didn't have the draw power to support the deck. Sure, Card of Safe Return was at 3 at this time and would remain so for years, but there wasn't a way to truly exploit it like they did in the OCG because Premature Burial was limited the entire time. Also, Graceful Charity, Card Destruction, Sangan, and Witch of the Black Forest would all go to limited status so much faster in the TCG than what happened in the OCG. This led, of course, to less consistency and way less speed. When Cyberstein finally got released in the TCG, it was as a Shonen Jump prize card and was nearly impossible to get, let alone thinking about obtaining multiple copies of it. Here's a sample deck list head feature writer Jason Gerbermeyer profiled at the 2004 US National Championship. Yeah, you can kinda see how slow and, well, honestly bad the TCG versions of this deck were. The only real positive for the TCG is that we would be able to pair the card with Self-Destruct Button, which was released in Invasion of Chaos. This at least gave players a failsafe that wasn't an option for the OCG at the time. Ironically, Henry Key did exactly that as he sided in the Last Turn package while playing Magical Scientist FTK when en route to topping the very first Shonen Jump championship. Overall, Last Turn was a colossal failure for the TCG, but it was truly a force to be reckoned with and definitely a revered deck on the other side for our OCG brethren. And with that, we are at the end of this Yu-Gi-Oh story. If you enjoyed the video, or more importantly you learned something, then give this video a big thumbs up and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for more weekly videos like this if you haven't already, and give me a follow at MegaCapitalG on Twitter. Thanks for watching.